Hello and welcome to the Crafty Pint podcast. I'm James.
And I'm not Will.
No, you're not Will at all. You're Craig. And
I am,
And,
yes.
we're also not in the studio. We're not even in Melbourne. We're here at the Moffat Beach Production
We're here
Brewery.
on my new neck of the woods, the Sunshine Coast, the craft beer capital of Australia, I'll have you know. And it's nice to welcome the Crafty Pint podcast to what I think should be beer's natural home here in Queensland.
No, we're sat here because we just had a chat with Matt Wilson from Moffat Beach for a future podcast episode. Made sense to sort of, keep the cameras rolling with our whole production team around us here, already in one place gathered here.
I know, and our feature panel, our feature interview this week is an episode on sustainability. We'll talk about this in a second, but that was something I recorded a few weeks ago.
Exactly.
So in terms of our timeline, it's all messed up, but hopefully it all comes together in the wash.
Yeah, I think so. And, I guess it's been a fairly, a big week in news, which I think pretty much every week seems to be at the minute in Australian craft
I have to
beer.
say, James, I'm really glad you got me on for my first sort of intro section for the podcast in really what's been a pretty massive week in news.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I have read a few articles and I haven't written any, but
And got some thoughts.
I have thoughts. I have thoughts and feelings, James.
Yeah. No, it was pretty amazing. At the end of last week, on the same day, we learned about Wayward and Akasha uniting the two businesses at the same time. Wakasha. I've seen Wakasha online. Will in our newsletter went with Akashwood. I think I quite like Wakasha.
I mean, it's Wakanda, it's Wakasha.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, there you go.
And then on the same day, Molly Rose Brewing reopened their venue, and I think it's a limited offering, limited hours, just 11 days after going into liquidation. The details...
A new record, by the way, I think.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so.
Within the beer industry.
Yep.
Yes, the details there are still pretty limited. I know they're still doing limited offering for a while. We don't know a huge amount of what's happening there because I guess it has happened so soon. This process is still ongoing. But I think what's been interesting, there's obviously some common ground between some of what's happened there. Certainly, so Wayward and Akasha had both been through VA. I know with Molly Rose's sort of liquidation. Akasha also liquidated their Newcastle wing of the business not too long ago when they closed the Edwards, pretty much without warning. The pub they bought in
Plus
Newcastle.
Wayward, I think, also having previously entered a joint venture or a merger with Batch to form that little the drinks collective.
Yeah.
Local drinks collective.
I think there's still that sort of shared distribution going on, but so it's sort of, I know it's different stories, different businesses, same day, but some sort of common ground there. And I think what we found is generally looking at the sort of the feedback responses online that we've seen in some of the conversations we've had, a lot of people seem quite welcoming and positive about the merger, whatever you want to call it, in Sydney, but also Molly Rose being back. Both stories have sort of prompted some of those other discussion points as well around, in these sort of cases where, where there's liquidations or VAs, what happens to the staff, entitlements, that kind of stuff. We don't know the full details, certainly, in both the more recent cases, but also potentially the impact on, whether it's suppliers, creditors, what this actually means. I've seen other brewers, jump on from small breweries going, what's the impact on us when we've sort of kept our, businesses tidy, I think is what Willie Simpson at Seven Sheds has said, that we're sort of doing what we do. And I think the other side of it that's sort of been raised is, and Phil Cook, who actually presented the inaugural New Zealand Brewers Guild Beer Writer of the Year many moons ago. He sort of rebooted his Beer Diary blog recently, and he's sort of seen that, the Wakasha issue as sort of a launch pad to discuss what does independence actually mean.
I caught Phil's article. He's in Australia now, isn't he?
Yeah, he was running Rangers Abbotsford tap room for a while.
Yeah, he was working at Stomping Ground for a while as well. But Phil writes under the blog Beer Diary at I think philcook.net, and he wrote a piece sort of probably a little bit semantically, but looking at the word independent and what that does that still mean, what we think it means. And he kind of draw the point of, you've got small breweries merging, you've got Hawkers, White Bay, you've local drinks collective, you've got all these different structures coming along, and at what point does independent really still mean the word independent? And he kind of, I guess, made the point that really when we say independent, when we're talking about that, we're really just meaning independent of the foreign ownership and so on. And
I think that, and maybe independent of the major retailers as well. That's become a bigger talking point with the home brand beers, having more prominence.
It's something. It's story. It did actually resonate with me a fair bit, and I kind of, maybe because I'm in marketing and communications, and I do think it's really important that we find the right way to sort of describe this industry and what it means. And I have no problems with the word independent. I think if you're naming a brewers association or using it as a collective term to describe an ownership structure, that's fine. But I do think it's really important that we get that story right to consumers. And, I've always had a little bit of a problem with the word independent. I don't think it has the same resonance with a consumer or someone buying a beer as it might mean to someone who owns a brewery. I think when at our core, we're consumers, and we really know that it doesn't matter what business you're in, you can be in brewing or whatever, but no business is truly independent. You're dependent upon customers, you're dependent upon investors, suppliers, staff, all of that. We don't operate on an island, basically. Yeah. So I don't know what it is, but my personal preference, I want to support Australian-owned businesses and successful Australian-owned businesses rather than foreign-owned businesses where they invest in the local community, they employ locals and so on. So I don't know if there's something in that feels maybe touched on a little semantic thing that, I think so. That could be bigger.
I've always liked local, and Phil touches upon this guy, does that only really work for smaller businesses? But I think local is something that's more easily understood. And I've always said, if you use local, you can bring someone into their local business, whether it is someone like Moffat here or, Black Flag up the coast, whatever it might be. And once people are in, if they're engaged, then the owners or the staff can tell the story about we're an independent business, and that to us means we're owned by mates or we're owned by family, and that way it's more engaging.
I think you should just be proud that you're an Australian-owned business and that you've built something in our country that's and not with a a nationalistic or a jingoistic kind of sentiment to it, but I think it's a pretty awesome thing to have built something. And I don't care what the structure is, if it's two businesses merging or whatever it might be, but if they're investing in our region, our country, I think you're seeing that at a state level. Like the Western Australians do it really well with that Drink West, Drink Best campaign. Even Tasmania, they've gotten right behind their local producers and suppliers. It can be done, and that story can be told, but I think it needs to be told in a more compelling way.
I think it's very hard also to find a catch-all term or even a phrase. I remember saying to people years ago when the CBI became the IBA, and I was like, what's your one or two sentence catchphrase that says to people, this is why you should support independent brewers?
It's the hardest thing.
It's really hard. But I think I look back 11, 12 years ago when I was writing the intro to the beer books I wrote and sort of addressing what craft meant, and I've mentioned him twice in the intro now today, but Willie Simpson, who's the beer writer, he sort of said it's like in the castle, it's the vibe.
Yeah.
And I was almost like, that almost captures it better because there's so many, to everybody, every consumer or everybody in the industry, they have a different set of parameters as to what they'll accept. And so it's craft to one person might mean something else to someone else. And I think really it almost is the vibe. And there's maybe more easily definable stuff around independence, but I think Phil touched upon it there. He'd rather support a business that it is a good business and a good operator. So maybe that's, ultimately whatever the phrase or the explanation might be, there's always going to be that grey area and that sort of debate. But it's certainly interesting to see that sort of debate coming up again. I think often you do sort of think the people that do know enough and care enough, they probably have the knowledge to make the decision on whether they're going to be impacted by that latest change or not. And those that don't care enough or don't know enough, they're not going to care anyway. And it's in another way, it's almost like we need to push the beer bubble further out to catch more people. As part of that, maybe that is getting more people involved in wanting to have that discussion.
We can solve that in another podcast, James.
For sure. But then I guess another big story that just more recently seems to be a really positive one you can probably give some insight on is Steve Jeffers, the founder of the local tap house, Gabs, the Hottest 100 stomping ground. He's taken over the former Deeds brewing space in Glen Iris, planning to turn it into a hospo venue, not brewing. And people may not know, but you worked alongside Steve for a number of years running Gabs. So you've probably got some thoughts again on this.
I do. I have lots of thoughts, as mentioned, James. No, Steve is an absolutely fantastic operator, and I spoke to him yesterday after the news broke, and he's very, very excited about taking on the opportunity in the former Deeds Brewing tap room, and really for him it was kind of I guess a match made in heaven, where he's obviously built the local tap house, starting his sort of beer journey there, starting the Gabs the Hottest 100 there, which then moved into Gabs, building those festivals out, and I worked with him for about 4 years, taking those festivals even further. Then Stomping Ground, and each of those things that he's sort of been involved in has just grown from strength to strength. And you think of even those 4 things we've mentioned, like, they've been a big part of the conversation around Australian craft beer for a decade now. So I'm excited to see what he can do next with the Deeds space. It is a fantastic venue, and Deeds put a lot of time and money and investment into that space, creating a beautiful environment. Steve as a person, he is to me, he's just the classic entrepreneur. Like, he's a very creative person. He's always got a lot of ideas. He's maybe, and I think he'd be probably the first to say as well, he's probably not the best at executing the million and one ideas, but he's very good at building the right team around him to be able to cherry pick the good ones and take them further. And I have no doubt he'll do that with the Deeds space. I don't know what he's going to call the new venue yet, but I think watch this space. I think it'll be beer, but probably bigger than beer, and have a bit more going on there as well. And the one thing I like about Steve, and we kind of touched on this earlier as well, is that whilst he's got lots of ideas and so on, he's always been very, very focused on the consumer experience. So found that with Gabs, it was all about how can we every year make this thing better to bring in new elements to the event that would appeal to female drinkers, or to this particular community or this particular community. How can we bring more people into the world of better drinks, I suppose. So yeah,
for sure. And I mean, very well received. Fascinating to see what happened. And I think talking and bringing more people into beer, or in this case, beer festival. We launched the full Pint of Origin festival site last week.
Exciting.
And the program. And after introducing the the Boilermaker Hub at Whiskey and Element last year, this year we've introduced a beer cocktail hub at Captain Melville. And there's some really great foodie stuff going on as well. So we're hoping to bring more people into beer venue, or traditionally beer venues and bars and breweries over the 10 days, May 9th to 18th.
I'm all about this. Pint of Origin is awesome. One, from an industry point of view, we're not setting up an event on some greenfield site or in a convention center and charging people a ticket to go to it. Where basically it's a free event. People can join in at their leisure. It's pushing people into venues, so supporting industry. You're also getting a chance to try beers that have never made it to Australian shores from all over the world.
And it's become so much harder for most venues to get hold of those beers as well. Now there's less beer being sent across the planet. I was speaking to the guys at Beer Mash a few weeks ago, and they were like, well, we don't know if we're actually going to be able to get hold of any Scandinavian beers. And then they got hold of the right person they'd used last year. And it's one guy kind of pulling together this palette for them, because most of the breweries over there aren't sending so much beer anymore. Like, it's almost become more of an effort to bring this stuff here and to get the beers across the country.
Mate, get some Rallings nominations in. I don't want to talk this event up too much, but Pint of Origin may just be the best festival in the entire world. So get to pintoforigin.com, get some tickets, or not tickets, but download your passport and get started.
You can buy tickets to some events, but if you head to pintoforigin.com, we've got the venue announcement and some other teaser videos going out at the minute. Every day, most days. So you can keep an eye on the Crafty Pint socials for that. And it should be just 3 and a bit weeks to go now. So
nice.
Pretty exciting. And we'll have a Pint of Origin Canada venue again at White Hart in the CBD. And if you want,
we're keeping them very far away from the Pint of Origin USA venue. Yes,
very true. And if you want to learn a little bit about sort of what the Canadian beer scene, we're actually going to ask went up on the website just, I guess, on the eve of this podcast, about the beer scene in Quebec.
Yeah, nice.
So people will know John Preston. He was the founder of one of the, leading homebrew shops in Australia, Great McGrain. His daughter is now gone into journalism, doing a few pieces for us. So Georgie's living in Canada at the minute and sent us a piece for any beer travelers going to Quebec. So you can check that out. We'll put that in the show notes as well. But so it's been a pretty full week.
Yeah, well, you're on the Sunshine Coast now, mate. So time to kick back. Island time. Here we go.
Exactly. So coming up in the break between the main panel, not so much an interview, but panel sustainability panel chat today. We've got our latest winners in our Have You Done a Rallings campaign. If you want to get your nominations in there, that's craftypint.com/Rallings. and also seeking more nominations for our Bluestone Yeast Brewer of the Month celebration of great breweries around the country. That's craftypint.com/bluestone. Which brings us to this week's main chat, which was you, Craig. This
Yeah, this one's
pitched us an idea a few weeks ago.
This one's the Craig Show. Hey, no, this one. I've got a personal interest in sustainability, and I know it's something that it's a topic that the Crafty Pint writes a lot about, and we're very rigorous in our coverage of sustainable brewing and so on. And I wanted to, I guess, create a bit of a panel discussion that sought to demystify it a little bit for breweries, particularly if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking, how can I get started on that journey, make my beer more sustainably and better for the environment? So we put together this panel discussion around sustainability, and we've got on there George Wade from Zavero, which is a UK business starting to work with a lot of Australian breweries, led by Tom Delmont in particular. We've got Jono from Eco Group, which makes sustainable can holders, and Tom Field from Bear Hug Pallet Wraps. These are all businesses that we've written about before, but it was a great opportunity to get them on board and just talk through that process of what does sustainability mean, how can we kind of simplify it a little bit, and what's the low-hanging fruit, how can breweries get started on the journey. So it was a really good discussion, and definitely enjoy.
Yeah, it's a nice zippy chat. So that's coming after the break. And before then, Will's not here to do his usual slot, so I guess I'll have to take over. Enjoy the show, and if you do, please like and subscribe, and you can even rate and leave a review or a comment on most platforms as well. So please do.
5 stars, my friend.
5 stars all the way. And yeah, thanks for co-hosting the intro with me today. In fact, pretty much the whole podcast today, Craig. So
there you go. Enjoy.
Cheers.
All aboard! Get ready to travel the world of beer at 22 pubs, bars and breweries across Melbourne this May. Next stop, Pint of Origin Festival. Visit pintoforigin.com.
Guys, welcome to the Crafty Pint podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to have you all here. We've developed what I think is a little special sustainability expert panel. And really the idea today, I go to a lot of industry conferences, I go to events, I talk to brewers out there. Sustainability is a huge topic of conversation, and it's something that the Crafty Pint covers rigorously. Some of the questions I get are really around, I guess sustainability is a big thing. They want to drill down on kind of how does a brewery become more sustainable, and how do they do it in a cost-effective way that ideally is going to even save some money. So today we put together a panel of guns from across the industry. We've got George Wade from Zavero, Jono Bunce from Eco Group, and Tom Field from Bear Hug. Guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Good to be with you.
Guys, it's going to be a fun one. I don't think we've had a panel before with 3 people, 3 guests on the podcast, so we'll see how we go. But I'll kind of talk to each of you at different times. But George, let me start with you from Zavero. Tell me about Zavero. How did the business what's the business about? What's the problem that you're trying to solve for Australian brewers?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much for having me. Zavero was started 4 years ago. And actually, interestingly enough, when I looked at kind of who was on this and seeing something about pallet wrap, it was actually one of the reasons that led me into working in the industry that I'm in. And effectively, I was working with organizations big and small on helping them understand how they can actually move the needle on sustainability. What is the impact of their business? And I found a lot of companies focusing on things like pallet wrap. And that is obviously an incredibly important part from a wastage perspective. But I was wanting to understand beyond the waste side, what are the biggest sources of emissions, and specifically for consumer goods based companies. And interestingly enough, that trigger in my mind was about how do I make the visible data from things like pallet wrap. That's easy for people to understand the impact, but the invisible information, which is all of the emissions that go within it. So now at Zavero, and over the last 4 years, we've worked with organizations, big and small, breweries across the world, to ultimately help them measure, reduce, and report on their emissions. So we work with breweries, whether that's Asahi in Japan through to companies across Australia, UK, to help them actually reduce their impact, but understand what it is and where it comes from, with that really kind of focused lens on brewing and the industry itself.
And George, you're primarily focused on carbon emissions as the main metric.
Yeah, absolutely. Greenhouse gas emissions. So it's all those other funny ones that are included. So it's CO2 equivalent is kind of how you'd see it talked about. But yeah, our focus is around greenhouse gas emissions, but we also do loads of other great stuff around things like reporting, supplier engagement, and things like that as well. So it's all in the realms of sustainability, but greenhouse gas emissions and CO2 is that number that gets the world going ultimately in our space.
Mate, you mentioned that word sustainability, and I'd love to just kind of, I guess, set the framework for that earlier in the discussion. But it's a big word, and I think for business, it can mean a lot of things. It can be, how you make your products, how you source your ingredients, how you transport your products, all of these different elements. I guess for a small brewery, like, how do you kind of just wrap their head around that big concept and give them a tangible starting point? Like, what's the place to get to?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and actually, a fellow Australian I heard speak about this in CBC Craft Brewers Congress in Vegas last year was James Perrin, and he said a lot of great things around this. And he was actually saying sustainability is what matters most to that brewery. So from my world, sustainability is around the climate, but sustainability is about things like what's your impact that you have on your community and things like that as well. So from the world of sustainability, it's about how do you create a business that cares about where you are and the impact you have. But from my world, which is around kind of sustainability from a climate perspective and solving that greenhouse gas emission number, I think the biggest thing for people to kind of, there's lots of complexity, but at the same time, it's super simple. I remember my co-founder initially, there's these technical terms, scope 1, 2, 3. When he first started and sold to his first brewery, he didn't really understand them enough. So he just said, ignore all of that, because he didn't want to explain what it was. He said, just think about everything that you buy, your brewery operations and when you make beer, and what happens when you sell it. And it's simply as much as that. It's what ingredients you're buying, where you're buying them from, who cares about sustainability with the ingredients you're buying, how do you do it in the most efficient way, which as brewers everyone wants to do anyway, right? Because it saves you money. And then ultimately at the end of it is how do you sell that, and what's the impact that you can have in the community and things like that as well. So I think that's the easiest way for people to understand sustainability, is work with yourself of like, what is the most important thing for you as a business. But then from a climate side, it's really assessing everything that you buy, everything that you do in the brew house and the production, and then kind of the packaging formats and the great solutions like Bear Hug, Tom, which we'll get into on how you can actually kind of make the difference with the products that you sell as well.
Yeah, nice. I think that's a really nice way to put it. Tom, let's jump to you. So Bear Hug, you guys have developed these really cool reusable pallet wraps. I saw my first one literally yesterday, and I was very excited. Mate, give me the backstory here. Where did the idea come from for Bear Hug pallet wraps?
I guess first few days out of high school, I went straight over to Modus Transport and started working there, driving a small truck around Sydney. And I think I just calculated the other day, over the 4 years I was there, I probably used about 300 kilos of soft plastic myself.
Yeah, wow.
So I think we're starting to make amends for that a bit. But yeah, it's actually not a product we developed. It's something that's been around since the 90s. I think it was invented in Canada. And I don't know, when I first started looking at the problem and what something can be done, we just ordered in some existing products, tested them out at Modus, and then started getting our own in. But the glaring thing there was that there's something that I can use because I'm delivering cases for 20 different brewers and then across 20 different bottle shops, and can take that wrap back at the end of the day. But the vast majority of pallet movement relies on stuff moving between multiple parties.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the two glaring barriers we saw there are the lack of a pooling system, any system for moving them between people, and the lack of automation, because any big company is gonna need something fully automated to be able to adopt.
Yeah, wow. And mate, just to, I guess, paint the picture of the size of the problem, give me the stats. Like, is there any way that we can kind of estimate just how much pallet wrap is used around the world at any one time?
I love stats.
I love stats too, Tom.
Yeah, stats are good. there's about 5 billion pallets in the world. Some of them are just, sitting idle in a warehouse. Some are getting used every 2-3 days. So it's definitely a pretty variable thing. But there is about 5 million tons of pallet wrap used every year. That's enough to wrap around the earth 16,500 times a year.
Jesus.
And I don't know if it does seem like a small percent, but 1.5% of all the plastic waste in the world is from pallet wrap. And I guess it does make sense when you're in the industry and you see that, you might be using X amount of plastic on each product, but for every 100 or so, you've got half a kilo of soft plastic going along with it.
And it's not, it's used once and then pretty much thrown away, isn't it? It's not like there's nothing reusable about it.
Yeah, and it's, pretty up in the air about what's recyclable about it as well. So, yeah.
Mate, well, very exciting. Well, and Jono, let's talk Eco Grip now. You guys, you make and sell can carriers, which are those little plastic clips that go on your 4-pack or your 6-pack and so on. And so it's certainly, I guess, it's not a new thing, but what's different about your range? How are you doing things differently?
Thanks, Craig. So EcoGrip is the only 100% Australian-made, 100% Australian-owned recycled plastic can carrier on the market.
Mm-hmm.
That 100% Australian-made flows through all areas of our business, from the manufacturing of the tooling, the molds, sourcing the recycled content that the EcoGrips are made out of, and producing the product. It's all made onshore in Victoria. When we came on board, there was no option for any breweries or beverage manufacturers to source anything locally. Everything had to be imported in from overseas, and that covers with it the carbon footprint of shipping things in, as well as bringing more plastic onshore without adequate recycling going on to make use of it.
Yeah, nice. And what took you down? What took you down the path to, I guess, this recyclable plastic? I've seen a few other options out there. Clips made from bamboo or even those recycled cardboard. Like, was there a journey to get to the 100% recycled solution?
What took me down that journey was I own another business, which is an engineering business, and we cater to servicing the nation's food and beverage packaging sector. And so I've always had a lot of experience in plastics. It's something that I grew up with throughout my career, and I've also been a massive craft beer drinker and a massive supporter of craft beer. And so those two things just sort of married up, and I realized for a long time there was no local option. And then when COVID hit, we had to get pretty creative with how we were going to keep the engineering business busy. So we basically became our own customer for a little bit.
Yep.
And created EcoGrip. And the market's been picked it up. Very, very overwhelming support on EcoGrip. A lot of customers are very concerned about their carbon footprint. So importing plastic from overseas, is something they were all very concerned about. And over the last few years, we went from a few breweries to being one of the most recognizable can carrier brands in the market. And we're on top of many great beers in every bottle shop in Australia now, which is something I'm really proud
nice. Is there a question of when you're thinking about developing a new product, it's like it's form over function, and I think you can look at other ecologically friendly alternatives, but maybe they don't do the job as well as a plastic solution. Cardboard goes soft in the fridge. Your bamboo ones might sort of not carry the weight properly of a pack of cans. But
you've definitely
is that a question from an engineering mindset?
Yeah, you've definitely hit the nail on the head. I mean, plastics are versatile, and all those other products definitely have their place. The feedback I was getting from breweries is on a mass scale, they are hard. It is hard to use those types of the more paper, cardboard, bamboo options, plastics, for better or worse, are here to stay. So it was about finding a more sustainable way of using that and supplying something like that.
Can they be reused, Jonathan?
Yes. They can be unclipped and reclipped, and a lot of bottle shops have their own take back things, so they will reuse them in bottle shops. Brew pubs reuse them. Yes, they can be reused, recycled.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's probably, I don't know if there's a next phase to it, Jono, but I see lots of posts on beer social groups and things like that with people with these huge stacks of can carriers and, creating that second layer of that circular economy of where can they, hand them in for some sort of benefit or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's definitely something we're looking at as a take back scheme,
Yeah.
so that we can basically cut out the middleman of the recycling centres. That is the next stage. It's quite an involved process, as you can imagine, because you'll be dealing with hundreds of different sites all over Australia and trying to bring that back. But that's something that we're working on for sure.
Mm. George, let's talk about, I guess, the motivations for a brewery looking to become more sustainable. In your experience with Zavero and working with a number of breweries now in Australia and the UK, why do breweries want to become more sustainable? Is it kind of the owner is environmentally conscious, that motivation? Are they looking to, is it a sales angle? Like, impress upon their consumers what they're doing, or is it about just saving money first and foremost? Like, what are the things that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it really interestingly varies across different countries, but also kind of with different kind of companies themselves as well, right? So in the UK, when we first started, we worked with kind of a lot of breweries, and I think that there's an inherent, evidently within craft beer, or as my colleague Tom Delmont tells me, good beer in Australia, in
Yep.
that effectively people care about their product, right? They want to produce a good product. They want to craft a great product. So there's an inherent kind of nurture around what it is they're producing. So we quickly found that breweries do care about not just their product, but also about the impact they have. And it's also a very physical kind of game, right? So whether it's Tom, you're working and you're driving around and recognizing all this pallet wrap, or if you're a brewer and you're getting kind of spent grain and then putting it into a container for it to be taken to a farm or whatever it might be, there's a really physical element to it. And I think that's where the initial interest from a brewer's perspective comes into it. So that's kind of where they're like, the desire to do something because it feels right comes from. Now, I'm not going to lie, there's a lot of obviously competing challenges within the brewing industry right now, and sustainability, rightly so or wrongly so, is not necessarily always top of that list. It's about making sure that we produce great beer, that we can do that in a way that makes the most sense and people can stay afloat. Otherwise, there is no point in sustainability in the first place. So in the UK, we have a lot more legislation with like big grocers and things like that, which is really putting the pressure on from the big grocers to kind of the mid-size to now in the craft beer side of things as well. But what we're finding most of all in like Australia with what we're doing at the moment, and the customers that we work with, that's like Cop Nation and the guys like that, is that there is an increasing need for this data to be used for, whether that's tenders or from the sales side, but also it's working with companies and with kind of businesses that do really care about this as well. So I think it ranges. There are a lot of benefits that come with it, especially in that kind of first mover adoption. The guys at like Rocky Ridge who have been doing this for a long time, and people associate their brand with something which is aiming to do better for the planet. So I think that in this new age, that's really a factor, but there's lots of different reasons. And my job is to, in a sales process or just generally when I'm getting to know a brewery, is to understand like what it is that will allow this to work for them. And that could be anything from an efficiency perspective, or it can be around what does it mean to be that brand, and does this exemplify what they want to achieve. And our goal is to make it as kind of affordable and as feasible for companies to do that as well.
And we'll be back in just a moment. But first, we're here to announce our next Have You Done a Rallings winner. James, now, we've been running this campaign with the support of Rallings label, stickers and packaging for a little while now. As you know, and hopefully our listeners are aware, this campaign came about, I guess, inspired by all the good beer citizens out there, the folks that kind of go above and beyond. They really embody that spirit of collaboration and sharing knowledge, sharing, helping each other out that we see so often across craft beer. I would put a call out to everyone listening. I would say that we had a big burst of nominations when we kind of first launched. It's definitely trickled off a little bit, so I would encourage everyone to.
I'm pretty sure there's still people out there doing good deeds around the beer industry, and I'm sure in this, time where things are a bit challenging, people would really appreciate that pat on the back, knowing that what they're doing is being recognised,
I'm just amazed no one's nominated me yet. Hint, hint, people who I work with. I've pretty much worked for praise. I will work for praise, and that's how I live and operate. So,
okay, noted. So
giving people a bit of giving people a bit of a shout out. All I want's a shout out, James. That's it. So we're back again. We've got a couple of nominations here. I think shortlisted. We've got someone on the list there, James.
Well, I'm technically on holiday at the minute. I'm a Smith. I'm here with some Smiths. I'm in Queensland, so this one ticked a few boxes for me. Nominator is Brendan Smith, and he's nominated his brother Matt Smith, a graphic artist who has designed logos and helped market Cairns Brewery McAllister's, so one of the small breweries up in far north Queensland. Apparently, Matt relocated to New Zealand, came across some hop varieties and products not yet available in Australia, sent them back to McAllister for them to try out. And he says he's always supporting this small up-and-coming brewery. I think he deserves some recognition. So I like that, it's someone who's no longer got an attachment to the brewery other than he likes it and just try to help them, find something new to do, despite the fact of having left the country. So I thought that was pretty cool.
There you go. Nice little honourable mention for Matt Smith. And who's our lucky winner for this week's Have You Done a Rallings?
Well, and this one is maybe a little bit, it's very timely, maybe a little bit in-house, but it's tied to Pint of Origin Festival. Which
presented by the Crafty Pint.
Presented by the Crafty Pint, starting on May the 9th this year.
Nice.
So the nominations come in from Dave at the Woodlands Hotel, been a Pint of Origin venue for a number of years. They represent regional New South Wales, and it turns out that they've always ended getting a lot of beers from a really sort of wide scope around regional New South Wales. And it turns out that much of this comes down to one man, which is Michael Sichocki from Tumut River Brewing. He was one of the guys that brought the brewery back from having been closed late last year with it as one of his former colleagues, Mary. It turns out that part of the reason that Dave's been able to get so many beers on tap for Pint of Origin is that Michael, on his travels around the region, will drive across huge swathes of regional New South Wales.
It is famously a very large area.
Yeah, exactly. Picking up one or two kegs from breweries, on the coast, in the snowy mountains, in the whole wider region, sticking them in his van, and he'll then drive them down with the Tumut beers that are going to be tapped at the Woodlands. And I think, hopefully people are aware of what goes into running festivals. You've been involved in running GABs. There's a lot of stuff goes on behind the scenes, but tens, dozens, hundreds of people potentially involved pulling these things off. And I think to hear that, I guess this one guy from one brewery, yes, he wants to have some Tumut River Brewing beers on at the festival, but he's also willing to sort of celebrate the whole region. So I thought someone going out of the way like that to actually support other businesses who you could potentially say would be his competitors is pretty awesome. So yeah, hats off to Michael, and yeah, thanks to Dave at the Woodlands for the nomination. So
yeah, nice one. And both Michael and Dave will receive a nice little voucher from Rallings Label Stickers and Packaging for getting involved, both for nominating and for winning the Have You Done a Rallings competition this week. Guys, definitely get on it. Think of that good beer person in your life, someone who's helped you, helped your brewery, helped your beers get out there into the world, or maybe to a festival. Jump on to craftypint.com/rallings. It takes 2 seconds and it can mean something pretty special to everyone involved.
Craig would love multiple nominations, I'm sure.
I would. I really feel I am deserving. So there you go.
Excellent. Anyway, well, back to the main show.
Back to the show. Cheers.
Cheers.
George, is there kind of a simple, I guess, starter kit of sustainability measures that you would suggest to a brewery when they first come on board with Zavero? What's the low-hanging fruit? How can they kind of get started?
Yeah, well, luckily we put together a whole guide on this for the last few years of
all
the work we've done. Yeah, exactly. Here's what came out of the oven. But yeah, there's loads of different things that we can do, and I mean, for me, the first and foremost is just in kind of involving the team, right? How many of those projects that you start maybe personally in a company or by yourself that you don't bring the right people in who really care about this? That's where we see this die. And I have the same from whether it's we work with a company and they're not able to bring everyone around it. That's the biggest thing for me, is start by bringing people together. Again, go back to that question you asked earlier. It's like, why is sustainability important for us and what does it mean for us? because then you've got company-wide buy-in and you can't really kind of get away with not doing it at that point. And then there's a couple of other kind of small things. It's everything from kind of looking at your energy supplier. Obviously, there's stuff like solar PV, which is upfront cost, but it's ultimately about like going through that list of, okay, where are we currently producing emissions? How can we look at reducing that? Interestingly, for breweries, what they can control is how do they be as efficient as possible with the ingredients that they're using, the gas, etc. But then more broadly, if companies are kind of looking to expand beyond that, malt is typically the single biggest emission source for them. So they can look at kind of who they're using and things like that. But I'm sure we'll be able to find a way to get either in the show notes the link to the free guide or some other way people can message me. But yeah, there's lots of great things. And I think it's really about just thinking about who do you need to get involved to get started. And by all means, that does not mean paying any money to somebody like me. You do not need to do that before you can do anything to take advantage of opportunities.
And I think it's probably it'd be quite revealing, wouldn't it, to look at something like that? And I wouldn't have thought off the top of my head that malt was one of the biggest impacts, I guess. But yeah, you're right. Like it's that downstream and upstream, to use some jargon, looking both ways along the timeline.
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads of stuff that we found, and I think the other thing as well is like every brewery is different. We've worked with companies here in the UK that sell basically all their beer within a 10-mile radius of where the brewery is, and they've got no emissions really from transport. So until you really go through that, you can then start to assess like what that looks like and where your emissions might come from. But it's a really great exercise of what we can do and how we can help companies understand what that looks like. And yeah, it's been wicked starting the company 4 years ago to now having, the guys at, whether it's Bodrigi or Hop Nation, kind of trusting us in Australia. And we know that there's a lot of opportunity for us to help people cut emissions and cut costs at the same time.
Mate, you mentioned cost, and that is the big one, George. Tom, I'd love to ask you from Bear Hug's perspective. I reckon cost is probably the number one perceived barrier to doing things more sustainably. Is there a perception out there that doing things the green way or the right way or the sustainable way is more expensive, is going to add cost to the bottom line? Is that perception still out there? And I guess, what do you say to counter that?
It's out there, but I think it's definitely changing. Reducing waste and inefficiency is kind of by its nature going to reduce costs if you're not having to, pay for the collection of throwing something out, and instead you can get a bit of cash back by recycling it. Or if you can, for example, what we always go with for the sort of benchmark for pricing for the reusable wraps, obviously it's a reusable asset, so how much you're saving depends on how much use you can get out of it. But with a wrap lasting 1,000 uses, costing $150, that's 15 cents each time you wrap a pallet versus $1.50.
Yeah, wow.
And then obviously it's just down to individual circumstances for a reusable asset. But on the whole, I think sustainable companies get their impact from like scaled adoption. So, there's a lot of companies out there that will charge a premium on a sustainable product, but I think that the majority are probably just looking to make more impact. And so, especially if you're in an industry that's so cost focused, then cost is king, and you've got to price for that. I think on the whole, Tom, as well. Yeah, go on.
Tom, do you have to buy the pallets, or do you rent them? Like in terms of that, like 15 cents versus $1.50, how does it work?
So our rental is 18 cents per day, and that's what we do via the pooling system. So that's 18 cents per day for a pallet wrap, 12 cents per day for a keg wrap, and that allows brewers to send them through their supply chain to wholesalers, 3PLs. Whereas just buying them outright is generally going to pay off better in the long term. Yeah.
But I guess you're right, Tom. I think, I use the analogy of like the solar panel industry, and, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was deemed as, it was a massive expense to just a household to put solar panels on the roof. But, you're going to get your money back or your value back over an extended period of time. And just as time goes on, technology gets better, the industry becomes more widespread and adopted, and all of a sudden it becomes a really feasible sum where you can invest and you'll make your money back in a couple of years, rather than the 5 or 10 years in the past. I think we're seeing that, just the fact that we've got you three guys, all companies that have been formed in the last 5 years or so. That there's more, I guess, suppliers out there offering cheaper solutions or more widespread adoption of solutions that makes it more palatable for a brewery.
Yeah, as the products mature, as the more competition comes in, cost is always going to come down in the long run.
Tom, I'm curious because I think as well you've maybe benefited a little bit from, or not benefited, but building off the back of the likes of Kegstar and Convoy with their keg pooling models, which was the previous solution was breweries would have to invest heavily in their own stainless steel and kegs, and all the transport and logistics that went around that. We've now seen a widespread adoption of a keg rental or leasing model through those guys. I kind of see this as like taking it to that next step of, well, what do you wrap those kegs in? One of the big, the world of shipping, logistics, warehousing, you mentioned 3PLs. It's a pretty complicated system out there. How have you gone about kind of getting that adoption of those guys? And do you think the fact that we've already got the keg model, has that helped that with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're launching in the US in 3 weeks or so, and we've started having conversations around pooling there, and it's not something I think that has as much recognition there. So we're not getting, we're not seeing the interest that we see here. And yeah, I guess with the kegs as well, we've just started with Likex. They're now using reusable wraps on some of their empty keg returns to brewers. So that's also a great one that we can piggyback, where, rather than a brewer having to pay a delivery fee to get more reusable wraps in, that they'll then, to step back a bit and show how the system works. It's, as I said before, the 18 cents per wrap per day subscription for whatever's there in your warehouse on your account. When you send them off, transfer them to your wholesalers, you stop paying for those. And I guess, so that's something that significantly cuts the cost for customers now, is that, the empty kegs will be coming in with reusable wraps on them. And you're just not paying that delivery fee anymore.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
No, very cool. Jono, mate, I would love to pick your brain about recycling in particular, because it's something I am very curious about, and you see a lot of news in the media around how our country is actually doing in terms of recycling. I guess like most Australians, I kind of have the assumption that I throw everything in the bin with the yellow lid and it just goes off to some magic place and gets turned into milk cartons or something. I don't think that's quite true, is it? Like, give me what's the real story?
Well, you're pretty close. So these days, curbside recycling in Australia is a lot more sophisticated than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Your recycled material that goes into your bin, it gets picked up, obviously sent to a sorting centre. It gets sorted out, cleaned, and then it can go on to another place to get broken down into resins and pellets. And then that is then on-sold to manufacturers, who will then turn that into products. Eco groups themselves, they start their life as milk jugs. And they then, through that recycling process, they are repurposed, given a new life, instead of ending up in landfill.
I guess, is this a message, that idea of like, we're turning milk cartons into your beer carriers, and we're doing it locally, we're doing it with minimal transport and impact and so on. Is that a message that resonates with customers, with beer drinkers? Is that something that I guess a brewer can communicate on their can carrier, or on their cans, or on their websites and so on? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I definitely think that it's a message that will resonate with consumers, especially if it's viewed with a realistic understanding of plastic use. The ongoing efforts to reduce single-use plastic and the environmental impact of single-use plastic are really commendable, but plastics as a whole probably aren't going away anytime soon. So as a society and as an industry, we need to start looking for ways to reuse and repurpose the plastics that we're currently using.
Yeah, nice one. Well, guys, we're going to wrap up in a minute, but I'd love to kind of finish our session. I guess I'd just love, like, 1 or 2 little pieces of advice from each of you on on how brewers can get started on this journey, and what I guess they'd get out of it. Like, what's the return on their investment? George, hit me. What do you got?
Yeah, I think from my side, in terms of that one piece, is to really work out like your why. It's if you've got a reason behind it, if you've got an understanding, you've got, like Jonathan, Tom, you started companies, you understand your why is what you want to do it. Breweries the same, they want to produce great beer, but they wanted to do it for a reason. So kind of understanding how sustainability fits into that why is the one thing for me. I think the final thing there is, like, the reason why people will benefit from it is what we're seeing across the board is that sustainability is becoming this hygiene factor, and that's to say that it's becoming something which you kind of almost have to do and have to think about, and anyone that doesn't do it will be left behind. The same way that, maybe a few years ago, if you did it, it was like, wow, that's exciting, that's really cool. Now it's actually, okay, yeah, cool, you're taking steps to reduce your impact on the planet, you're trying to be more sustainable, we expect that of you. And I think coming from the UK, and where I see that a lot more, and any company that's kind of not taking that impact and has not gone through that process already is feeling very much behind. I have conversations with brewers who go, I really wish we started this a couple of years ago, because we see all these great people. Luckily, they're always pointing to my clients, which is always nice, doing great things. And we want to be there. And I think for people to understand that they don't just get to there overnight. It's actually about recognizing that it's a journey, bringing the right people together and finding that reason. And then a lot of benefits come with it as well, I think.
I love the way you said that it's like a hygiene factor. It's kind of, you look back 60, 70 years or whatever, and it was occupational health and safety. And, how are we operating a business for but keeping our workers safe? And it's kind of an extension of that. And now it's like, well, how are we operating a business keeping our workers safe, but also keeping our planet safe? And it's a great little analogy.
Yeah, I've actually used that a lot in the past. I was going to say health and safety was a nightmare administrative burden, which I'm sure for a lot of people it still is. But companies found a way to get through that, and everyone hates sustainability for it being a burden data-wise now. We try to solve that, but I think it will get to the point where it's so easy for everyone to get that layer in. It's about who can make the action kind of happen quickest and who can really reduce emissions as well.
Well, I'm sure back in, the Industrial Revolution times, they would have had a podcast like this, and it would have been, well, how can we stop people getting their arms caught in machinery? And now
Exactly.
it's how can we reduce our greenhouse gas emission? Times change, but the problems are the same. Tom, what's your nugget? What can you tell us?
I guess for a lot of service-based companies or whatever out there, like your emissions and your waste can be quite a complex, abstract thing. But I think for product-based companies like brewers, often it's right in front of you and it's a pretty visceral thing. So I think it's just taking the time to just stand in the warehouse and look around and sort of think on the logic of if you've got a lot of empty miles on trucks, there's platforms out there to fill those empty miles. If you've got pallet wrap in your warehouse that you're putting on and then cutting off a day later in the same warehouse, then there's solutions out there, and often they're pretty simple.
Do you know any solutions there, Tom, for that pallet wrap situation?
Unfamiliar.
Yeah. Nice.
It's you're right. It's such a visible thing that brewers do. We've all been on the brewery tours. We've all had this is how the beer is made. Here's how it's packaged. It comes out. It's a very simple process and very easily understood by a consumer. And I think it's you can very quickly identify small tweaks that make a big impact, and then most importantly, you can communicate that to your customers for to benefit your brand, benefit your impression, and so on.
Yeah.
Jono, mate, last man on the pod. Here we go. Give me the nugget from Eco Group.
Yeah, look, I probably just echo what the other podcast guests have said. It's a lot about your inputs.
That's the easy way out.
Yeah, I know, but it's true though, isn't it? It is. It's about your inputs. I myself run a manufacturing business, and it's about looking at those inputs. It's not necessarily always looking for those big ticket items like solar power, but it can be that real low hanging fruit of that everyday item. How can you get a more sustainable outcome out of your packaging, out of your transport?
Yeah, and packaging is probably it's such a single-use plastic is probably the devil in all of sustainability. It's the one that draws probably the most attention out of because it is so visible every day in everyone's lives. You can really tell a story with that, and I think making a small change on something that it might look like a little one piece of plastic, one clip, but it's billions of them every year that are going out. So making a small change there can make a big difference. Guys, thank you so much. This has been great, and I'm thrilled with this 3-person panel thing. This seemed to work pretty well. So I really appreciate your time this morning and this evening, George. Look out for it on the Crafty Pint podcast. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Sorry for getting everyone up early this morning.
All good, mate.
All good. Cheers, guys.
The Crafty Pint podcast is produced and edited by Matt Hoffman. You can get all your beer-related news and reviews on the Crafty Pint website, craftypint.com, and can stay up to date on future podcast episodes via our socials.
We wouldn't be able to produce the podcast or the website, events or festivals we run without the support of the beer industry, whether that's suppliers, bars, breweries or bottle shops. If you'd like to support the show or partner with the Crafty Pint in other ways, please reach out to Craig via the details in the show notes.
And if you're a beer lover who'd like to support what we do, you can join our exclusive club for beer lovers, the Crafty Cabal. Visit craftykabal.com for more.
And until next time, drink good beer.